lots of sushi. We're over in Japan.
Give us a bit of an intro, a bit of background to you, and what you're up to.
I've always been interested in humans and human data.
Right, it's all because of TikTok and social media and adverts and stuff like that. Is that true?
Yeah, that is a big question. First of all, we're highly visual, and the screen is a big thing. So I like using ChatGPT. Elon Musk is a guy that you got to be careful to bet against. We need either immigration or automation. One of the biggest challenges with artificial intelligence is actually getting the right data, athlete performance around VO2 max, so lung capacity. You've made me feel uncomfortable.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of B2B Unplugged. I'm Dan, I'm the founder of Brandtail and the B2B Unplugged podcast, and today I am joined with our transatlantic friend, Matt from Element Human. Hi Matt, how are you?
Good. Thanks for inviting me here.
It's my pleasure, and you just come back from a holiday, so you should be well rested and ready to go, hopefully.
Yeah, lots of sushi. We're over in Japan. Excellent place. Whole different culture and different approach to emotions, but very good.
Yeah, we can dive into that. I guess for our viewers who don't know who you are and what Element Human do, give us a bit of an intro, a bit of background to you, and what you're up to.
Yeah, sure. So I've always been interested in humans and human data. So ever since even university, where we kind of use sensors to understand athlete performance around a VO2 max, so lung capacity. And so how do we use that then to drive outcomes for them? So performance outcomes in racing and stuff like that. And that over the last 25 years has translated, how do we bring in a lot of data and information that we can observe through the sensors around us and use that to help get better understanding and prediction of business outcomes. So today, Element Human was kind of built around the premise of can we tap into the sensors on the phone, so video, microphone, and touch, and can we use that to predict business outcomes? So how people interact and during their interactions, given everybody's online now, and interacting even with AI. So how do we build that empathetic behavioral feedback loop, the observing of the body language? There's a lot of stuff out there that is around kind of clicks and proxy metrics and stuff. And so we wanted to fill that gap around the context. Are people smiling? Are they happy? Are they bored? Are they tuning out already? Hopefully not. And so that's kind of what we set out to do about 10 years ago. And then 4 years ago, we started to kind of dive right into the creator economy space because there's a bit of an information gap and measurement gap there where you exploded into a highly fragmented market. There was no way to compare different creators on different platforms and different audiences and understand all of that stuff. And so we found that attention, emotion, and memory were actually really good cross-comparative metrics. So when you got a view on, let's say, LinkedIn versus a view on YouTube from different creators, you can now actually measure them by how much attention did you get, how much emotional reaction did you get, and how memorable was it to driving, let's say, purchase intent further down the funnel. So that's where we kind of have started to use human behavior to predict business outcomes.
That's really interesting. So what are the type of things that might predict whether or not somebody is more likely to do the type of action that somebody might want? So, for in the example of the creator economy, presumably it's watch more of my videos or click on the link that I tell you to click on, or whatever it is. So, what are the things that good creators do that the bad ones potentially aren't doing?
Well, good versus bad in the creator space. It's
subjective, but
yeah. So I think it's more of a horses for courses thing, in that most, because of the lack of visibility or standardized measurement inside the creator economy, so about 99% of content that gets viewed doesn't get clicked, right? So you've got this quite a big delta between the view and the click. And the thing is, most creators are actually paid. A lot of creators, especially in affiliate marketing, are paid on the click. And so they have 4 or 5 weeks of click tracking where it's like, sign up to this link on the advertisement of a podcast or whatever, sign up to this link. And if it's not clicked within those 4 or 5 weeks, then they don't get the credit for it. And so one of the challenges that you have there is that, like, that almost ignores brand building. I mean, you're maybe not going to buy a car in 4 or 5 weeks. So does that mean that, or even actually, I think in the content creation space is a great one. So there's a lot of people, if you want to get into content creation, a lot of founders like myself are being asked to get into content creation. What are your thoughts? Get it out there. You are the brand. I didn't know nothing about content creation other than what I do on the measurement side. But I don't know, like, what video to use, what editing tool to use, what podcast tool to use. And so you have to ask around. And then there's content creators out there who focus on that, test them all out, and then give you the review. So I would take that, but I might not buy it in the next 4 weeks. I might buy it in, a year's time when I actually get my media plan in play and start to do that. Well, they don't get credit for that. So it was about really plugging that gap in the middle and being able to say, okay, could we understand the attention, emotion, and memory? And we found that after view, you have to look at the attention. There's quite a difference between the amount of people who view or get served, because viewability is serving, get served an ad versus how many people actually look at it. And then just because you look at it doesn't mean you pay attention to it. We call these the 4 horsemen of the adpocalypse. So you have to kind of go from viewability to attention to emotion to land in a memory structure that then eventually hopefully puts you front of mind for purchase. And we found pretty strong correlations, and we have now two axes that help us understand whether a creator is doing a good job for the brand message or not. And it's called stopping power and staying power. And the stopping power is basically, do you have the ability inside a feed of highly interactive, engaging content that you might find on your social media? Does your content stand out? Do people actually stop and look at it? So it's not, do they just see it, but they stop and look at it? And then the staying power is, now that they've stopped and looked at it, how much has it boosted your brand resonance? And we found that the stopping power very highly correlates with awareness, and that the staying power very highly correlates with purchase intent. And that allows us to be able to, allows a creator to understand if they need to tweak the message, if they need to improve their content. And it allows an agency to be able to say, okay, we're going to double down on the paid aspect of this creative content. And it allows the brand to know where to invest and which creators to invest with.
I suppose, playing devil's advocate, you could argue that stopping power is basically clickbait. And if you were, I guess, so minded as a creator, you could create something that was deliberately provocative to get somebody to stop and to then engage. What does the element human tool do to sort of eradicate that type of technique?
Well, clickbaiting is more of a human function than it is a technique, right? So basically, if humans are going to click into something, you have actually achieved the first test of grabbing attention. That's the whole point. So if clickbait works for grabbing attention, and people are often very quickly let down, but then your job's not done once you've grabbed attention. Just because you grabbed attention, again, you now need to deliver the emotion and the memory structure. So if you've grabbed attention and you're then not delivering the emotion, the memory structure, the user, just think about the last time you were clickbaited. You go, oh, that's not at all what I was looking for. This is some advertisement for whatever. And you just sit there, you're like, okay, all right. I was looking up fishing stuff the other day, and then all of a sudden I saw this guy talking about food. I was like, great, okay. Well, it turned out to be an advert. I clicked on that I thought it was around fish, and it's like, no, it's about his new whatever revolutionary dieting program. And it's like, that's not what at all. So, but I mean, he got me because he was talking about fish, and that's what I was looking at. So I was like, okay, well, so grabbing the attention, that's why attention alone isn't actually the only thing that we need to start changing about how we think about the marketing funnel and getting through the stages. So for me, now I'm going to look at that guy, his brand, and go, I am going to avoid you at all costs. Because that's the memory structure that I walked away from. The engagement was, I've been clickbaited, therefore I feel like an idiot, therefore I'm never going to work with you again. and I'm certainly not going to buy your products or services. And so that's why the hard part, get attention. So you kind of do want to clickbait, but you want to get them into something. Authenticity is a large play, and we track authenticity across our systems. And if you're not authentic in your messaging, you're going to have a pretty negative memory structure, which is not going to put you front of mind for purchase intent.
Although I would assume that the data stacks that up, right? If you're just baiting people and then you're not delivering on your promise,
yeah,
that people
bounce back. We're finding authenticity is becoming highly correlated with purchase intent.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is the implicit testing that we use. So really understanding whether it's a negative or positive memory structure, that kind of tells us pretty quickly.
And how does that? We were talking a little bit about this before we hit the button to record, but how does that correlate with B2B audiences? The majority of our audience are B2B marketers and founders and people that are running tech businesses. So how does that correlate to them? I've always been of the opinion that people are people, right? And that if you're trying to sell to them and you're trying to appeal to their emotions, the logic applies either way. It doesn't matter what market they sit in.
Yeah, and if data is your business, and everybody is a data point, and frankly, data is a large part of the world economic business these days anyway. People are people, and data is the business, and it doesn't change. And I think one of the biggest things and one of the biggest mistakes that's made in marketing is the assumption that your brand message is being received in isolation. Like a lot of our measurement still deals with it as, the brand is just received in isolation. Yeah. That's why we look at attention, emotion, memory inside the context of what we do. Because quite frankly, half the people that we're selling to, whether you're B2B or B2C, you're sitting there and you're still competing with a scrolling capability. You're still competing with, whether they got to pick up the kids at school, you're still competing with all kinds of other things that are a distraction to those memory structures. And so, I don't see a huge difference in B2B and B2C from a funnel's kind of the funnel. I know people are debating whether the funnel's there. No, it's just either moving faster or slower depending on the channel. And the neuroscience pathway is not changing. I think the real implication and risk that everybody's got to look out for, especially when you're seeing this on LinkedIn right now, is just the ramp up of like video content and the ramp up of kind of paid content in there. His content is the amount of content that we're given to consume is just overwhelming. And it's about, and this is where I feel that our technology is really strong, is that we start to detect where the feedback loop, you're kind of plateauing as an individual. If I've been scrolling for 4 hours a day, I'm probably not taking as much in after that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where it actually becomes really interesting. And I think that's where the data gap is, even with the AI stuff, especially with Gen AI, where you can, as a brand, kind of create pretty much anything and just pop it out there and you don't have to pay for it. So content creation, even though it used to be king, it's quite cheap now. Yeah. And so how do we create high quality content, which is not cheap still? It still takes human time. How do we create authentic content? It still takes human time. And I think, that's where the artificial intelligence and machine learning and that type of stuff needs to consider and come into play, is how do we empower the human to create and tell their story a lot better and authentically.
My gut feeling tells me that emotion is probably more important for B2B marketers than it is for B2C, but for that very reason, because the funnel's so much longer, the decision-making process, generally speaking, is longer. And people do forget who your brand is, so you have to constantly remind them. So I think without the data to support it, I think I would argue that point that making that emotional connection makes more sense for B2B marketers than anybody.
Our first, it reminds me of our first projects we did, and I just remember it was with the BBC, and Tim Davie was just very, very direct on, trust is our only currency, and I think that resonates and reigns true with B2B in particular, is that you don't really get that upset if, you buy something from the shop and it breaks. You gotta okay, we'll send it back. Or, it's a little bit upset. It's a little bit inconvenient. But if you've if your accounting software doesn't work, or if your measurement provider falls short, or if one of your vendors doesn't come through for you, there's a pretty big emotional toll to it. And so I think that's the easier way to understand how high the emotional risk is. And I do agree with you. I think B2B, there's a lot of it's trust. Trust is your currency. Trust is your game, and trust is only built through kind of authentic emotional memory structures.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people are going to respond positively or negatively depending on their interaction with you, and your job is to make sure that that's consistent and builds connection, I suppose. And that's, I mean, the brand marketer in me, I think, would always say that anyway. That's just what I believe, but it just seems logical.
Yeah. And we see authenticity and emotional content definitely performs higher than the rest.
Mm-hmm. So the system that you're building, you're obviously supporting brands with their understanding of human emotion and connection and whatever else. How's that used? What brands are using it? How are they using it? I assume it's mainly sort of product teams and sort of marketing teams and stuff. So, but how does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, really, really simply, if you're going to build a new category of data and information, kind of like if you're going to build a new power source for a vehicle, don't make the vehicle look like something that is from an alien planet. So we kind of just, it's packaged up as a, yeah, we package it up as an ad test. It's just an ad test. So you just go in, you upload an ad, and then you tell us the market you're sending it to. If it's a creator ad, then you tell us the creator, and we look at their audience, and then we get that audience or lookalike audience from one of our panel providers, Cint, we use regularly, and then we have the webcam on while they're actually going through a bunch of survey questions, and some of those survey questions are some custom built environments that we have that allow you to pick kind of the platform that you're on, and it has kind of relative updated feeds of that stuff with the content in it, and we're watching them with the webcam, so it's all consent based, but we watch them with the webcam, and from there we're able to see where the eyes are moving, the head gaze, and we pull about 256 data points per frame at 30 frames a second, so it's a very rich data set that we're getting, but it also allows us to do a lot of quality controls. So a lot of people speed through surveys. There's a lot of survey takers who are paid to do surveys who just like,
yeah,
they're doing 16, 17 survey. I have videos of people you can see that are in survey farms, and so it allows us to disqualify. Yeah. You could literally. It's amazing because in the screen on the side you'll just start to see other devices, and they're just going click, 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 click.
So that's me when I have to do my GDPR training every year. Like,
yeah. Yeah, well, I can tell you it's been quite interesting navigating regulation in this space, because emotions do sit in the sensitive data category of PII.
yeah,
And so and we could talk more about that if you like, but I think what we do is we then we take the written response, so we kind of ask them what they're going to do, just like you would on any other kind of measurement test, and get there, and then we pair it with the implicit test, which is speed, time, response, the eye tracking, the emotion tracking, and it gives us kind of that rich context of are any of these leading indicators to some of the brand results we're looking at. And then of course we got about 30 billion data points from the last 4 years of measuring in the industry. So we have these huge benchmarks and norms across 21 categories, which allows us to know whether something's an anomaly or not, whether something's off or not. So not only at the individual level, but also at the kind of campaign level, or even at the brand category level. So it gives us kind of a lot of quality controls before then we give a report back to a customer, who will get a stopping and staying power report. So where do you sit on a 2x2 quadrant? Are you kind of high stopping power, low stopping power, or are you high staying power, low staying power? And if you're in the top right, you're doing really well. If you're driving really good kind of brand connection, that means that not a lot of people stop to watch it, but those that did really saw a huge uplift. And then if you're in the staying power or in the stopping power, then high up on the left, then it's a lot of people did stop to watch it, but they were moving on pretty quickly. They didn't link it to the brand at all.
yeah.
And then of course if you're in the bottom left, it's probably turf the work and learn from
Yeah.
it. But then the second layer is all these diagnostics. So we can give you second by second of how are you expressing? How were the group expressing? And it's not about one individual. It's about where are they all reacting at the same time? And what's that intensity of the reaction? And we find that the intensity tends to lead to very memorable moments. So the system automatically pulls off the key memorable moments within the content that said these are really kind of your big moments. So if we were to run this whole podcast through or videocast through the system, it would then come out and tell us these are 4 or 5 most memorable moments, most interesting, where people were leaning in, looking around, doing all that type of stuff. Now, again, this is more of an information oriented type of content, so it'll be very passive. But we are talking micro expressions. So we will see those moments, and then we're able to pull those out, and then they could use those for like thumbnails, or if you're thinking about doing cut downs, like a 5-second, 10-second, 15-second cut down. So it's a really good use case for optimization. And the beautiful part about using the emotional stuff is that you do get that cross comparison. Attention is attention. You're competing for attention. You're competing for emotional. You're competing for space in the memory. That doesn't change by channel. It's consumers will go to multiple channels, and in fact, with each creator, you could argue is their own channels. You have 500 million channels out there, and so that doesn't really change. So that's kind of how it works, and how we leverage the data so that marketers can get this really, really rich insight from real people, and the turnaround times are fast. It's like we can do it in 24 to 48 hours. So you could just upload, go get that response back. So then you can say, okay, do I need to modify that? Where do I double down with the rest of my media spend? I don't need to spend all my media all at once. And so it becomes a really interesting approach to kind of paradigm shifting from the old school marketing approach and advertising approach to highly iterative, highly tested, highly data driven.
Have you run things like Christmas adverts through that? I mean, that's a big thing in the UK.
Yeah. Christmas adverts, Super Bowl adverts, political campaign, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, so every time Donald Trump comes on, everyone gets upset, or like.
So it was actually quite interesting. This election was, a lot of people thought it was a lot closer than the data was saying. But I think the
first saying the day before it was 50-50, weren't they?
Yeah, from the polling. But again, polling is survey based. I came from the survey world, so I spent 5 years working with a gentleman named Angus Reid, who is the top pollster in Canada. And learned a lot about polling and polling. There's an art and science to polling. It is a phenomenal thing that those people do. But when we did, so we dabbled in it a little bit with the emotions as part of it. So Brexit. So we looked at Scottish referendum, Brexit, and the first Trump election, and we managed to actually call all of those correctly, despite what the public sentiment was. And almost to a scary degree of accuracy to both to mainly the populist vote.
Because of the understanding of the emotional response.
Yeah, of just saying, and because of understanding the juxtaposition of what people say they would vote versus how engaged they were emotionally.
Yeah.
And which emotional direction they were engaging. And
I guess quite often when it comes to voting, people say what they think is the right response to say when they're asked publicly, but actually behind closed doors they probably think a different thing because they think, oh, I might get called right wing if I say that, or I might get called left wing if I say that. So I just say.
Yeah. One of the first awards that we won was the grand prize with the MRS, and that was a market research society in the UK, and that was with the BBC Worldwide, and we had tested a bunch of content, and that's where we'd understand this juxtaposition of what people say versus what they actually feel, and again, classic 2x2. So what you say is like, so how you feel is. I don't feel anything it was highly expressive. And then on the rating, it was a simple rating scale, rate the content. So we would observe you watching the content and we'd ask you to rate the content. It was kind of a 0 to 100. Anyone who was in the top left was rating it really highly but not engaging. And we noticed that all of those households, we got the household numbers back from Nielsen, all of those households were actually they weren't actually engaging. It was just they were in those social groups that that TV show was talked about. There was also the what we called the guilty pleasures. They were one of my favorite because they're down at the bottom, and at the bottom of the 2x2 they go, cool. Right down at the bottom here, these are ones that, oh no, horrible show, but actually highly expressive, and actually all of those shows were watched and always beat primetime average. So it was quite interesting to see that correlation between feel versus say, and that continues to be something that we explore today to be able to make calls as to the kind of the veracity of what people's post-cognitive response is versus what their pre-cognitive response is.
Yeah, I mean, human behavior is just it's one of the most fascinating things, I think, because people will often do things that completely contradict what they say, and vice versa, will say things that contradict what they believe, and it's just, yeah, it's mental. So having I guess from a marketing perspective, having a tool that enables you to be able to look at things and say, well, that's actually what they think. Is especially when you're running brand campaigns.
We see this all the time. We see this all the time, and it allows us to build a product that allows people to go, oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense. Like we thought it was going to do well, but no, there's literally no engagement here. We thought it was a good story, but no.
Did I see on your website also that you work with Netflix?
Yeah.
So do you get a lot of people that, I mean, how do you get around the problem of people watching a TV program and doom scrolling on their phone or something in between adverts, or just because they get bored?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I don't think anybody's actually cracked that entirely, because we first worked with Twitch, and that was and launched built some really cool stuff with Twitch around linking into video completion rate on streaming, and that was the first place where we encountered kind of the two-screen problem, right? And so I'd say most of our stuff served on mobile. So we're typically doing the measurement on mobile. So we do measurement in our own environments. So they're kind of mock environments or lookalikes. And so it is kind of a quasi lab based approach. It's not pure real on their platform, all that type of stuff. None of the platforms let you into that side of the walled garden. But it gives us a much stronger proxy than just the platform metrics of view and click.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting into I guess the lack of attention span, and this is something that I guess frustrates me slightly as a person that's in the marketing world. We often get blamed with, you're the reason that people haven't got attention spans anymore, and it's all because of TikTok and social media and adverts and stuff like that. Is that true?
Oh man, that is a big question. There's an existential question there too. I think it's about understanding the function of emotions. I think our one of my colleagues that I worked with, his name's Patrick Fagan, and he's now gone out on his own. He's a behavioral scientist, and I absolutely respect a lot of what he says and does. But there is one of the things that's always resonated with me. He said, emotions are a bouncer to the brain. I was like, that's a really good way to look at it, because first of all, we're highly visual, and I mean, screen is a big thing, and so people now, it's very screen based, and visual than auditory, but we are definitely a little bit more visual than we are auditory, and that's how we operate. But what's been very interesting is if you think about the brain of taking, let's say, 11 million bits of data per second and being able to process that, only 40 bits per second, and that's sort of that rough ratio, is about used in the cognitive capacity of actual thinking. Everything else is about filtering out and quickly assessing signal autonomously. And so that's kind of the emotional layer. And that's why it's so hard to pinpoint emotions. That's why it's so hard to build emotional models. Like even emotional models in AI are under constant development. It's an area that started with this idea from Dr. Paul Ekman of 6 basic emotions, and now has kind of morphed into a number of different models that take different theories and all that type of stuff. But it's hard to even ground truth emotions themselves. And so what we kind of look for is, what are the body language signals that people use to uh, to validate whether somebody's going to do what they say. And I think that is a core human function. We learn that as children. We learn that as we explore more cultures, and so that's kind of what it is. But I think it's a filter to the brain. Emotions are a bouncer to the brain. So I think that's a better way to look at the core problem.
We touched a little bit on AI, and I know you've got a bit, well, both your tool and you've got a bit of background in sort of artificial intelligence or whatever else. If you believe our friend Elon Musk, who creates crazy cars, it's going to be the destroyer of the world. I'm not sure I'm on that camp, but he's a bit mental. So, what do you think, as somebody who's a bit more experienced in it, and sort of lives in that world? Is AI going to take all of our jobs and leave us all sort of running around for food, or?
No. The humans are highly adaptable and built for evolution. So no, I think AI will be leveraged for personal gain as much as possible. But I think the job changes, and I think people are always scared of job change. So, for example, my wife's a lawyer, as an example, and a large part of law is kind of doing research on case law and all that type of stuff, and then being able to summarize that and understand the positions and understand the arguments you can make based off of the strengths of those positions, particularly, well, in certain legal systems. It depends which legal system you're in. And, AI can help you do a lot of that. There's a lot of manual labor there that AI can help you do, and time saving there that AI can help you do. But to fundamentally understand then the issue and create the argument, you have to dig into certain areas. You have to learn how to prompt and probe and all that type of stuff. So your job as spec is essentially changing. You can get speed, but you have to learn how to prompt correctly. You have to fill it with the right data. You have to make sure it's not making stuff up. You have to make sure that you're applying it to the right domain. And this is where the emotion side comes in. The stuff, the advancements that they've had in large language models work because languages are codified. Body language is not codified. And there's a lot of work to be done to get an empathetic layer into the internet, that the language layer to be at the equivalent acceptance level of what the language layer is currently at. And so I think we're at a very interesting time in AI. I'd also say that Elon Musk is a guy that you got to be careful to bet against. He tends to be right about a lot of things, but he also says a lot of things that are kind of a bit extreme.
Yeah, he says a lot of things, and he's therefore right every now and again.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he does say a lot of things. That is true. I'd like to understand why he would think that. If that was, and typically when you ask the question why and you find out there's not much more behind it, then it's clickbait.
Yeah, I think generally, if you take something to the existential point of, looking at AI, or as a generalized term, artificial intelligence, if it evolves to the sort of end degree of what you can imagine, it would be catastrophic, because you could imagine, for example, if you had a tool that was used to bet on market conditions, and share bet and trade and things like that, and you told that tool to do whatever it wanted to make the price of something go up, it could, theoretically, it could start a world war to make the price of oil go up. Like, because computer doesn't have, like you were saying, doesn't have the emotional layer, the empathy to be able to say,
my fundamental belief is the counter to that is making sure that an AI can understand the implications and impact of its actions.
Yeah.
And that is where it currently is probably a weak point of AI. Now, another weak point of AI is that it can only learn as fast as it has power to learn. Still dealing with a massive power consumption issue. So I think we're a bit of a ways off, but it is why we started the company. It is exactly why Diego and I started the company 10 years ago, when emotion models were still being built on support vector machines. Convolutional neural nets still hadn't actually been proven yet. So we started in this space early, very simply because you can't really rely on what people say. It's part of the message. You can't really rely on how people feel. It's part of the message. And if you're going to create autonomous agents through that, which we do need, particularly in the Western world, because of a birth rate that's just not allowing us to fill the jobs that need to be filled with the expertise that needs to be filled in the time that needs to be filled. So we need either immigration or automation. And in order to get automation at a sophisticated level, you need something like artificial intelligence that is going to do some of the thinking. But then you also need the real-time feedback loop like you and I have of, this is an uncomfortable situation. You've made me feel uncomfortable. You've made me feel comfortable. You've actually achieved the work can't just be outcome checkbox. It's outcome checkbox in a way that empowered the human being. And if we constantly leave the second half of that sentence out, we are driving ourselves into the ground. I mean, I think whoever said it best was, I didn't create AI so that it could do the creativity and I could wash the dishes. I created AI so they could wash the dishes and I could do the creativity.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing that I think what I always say to people when they say, "Oh, AI might take over our job sometime." I always say to people, but you can't replace creativity. That's a human part of the brain.
And AI will eventually form its own form of creativity, but it's just another. It will compete with, and there will be people who like that form. But again, it's down to the people liking that form. If AI likes its own creativity, well, it's like, good for you, but it's not going to represent any sort of monetary gain.
No.
Not in the long term. In the short term, there will be blips where there's ways to cheat the system, but that's always a short-term thing, and it's just that just escalates back and forth always over time. But long term, I think it will come down to humans, and we will be able to have kind of the birth rates going down. It'll be fine. We'll be able to have less humans on the planet. We'll become more sustainable because of that, and it's I think it's really good. But there's no point in building AI if you're not going to improve the human condition. I just don't see any reason for doing it.
I agree. It needs to be a tool.
That's the whole love. Like, people are awesome. People are really, really awesome, and I don't know why. We've come through the last 100 years of saying technology is awesome. And it's like, yes, but it's there to enable people.
Yeah.
And people are awesome. So let's keep enabling people and driving towards a place where we don't need, and this is such maybe a utopian point of view, but a place where we don't need to have wars to overcome our own personal kind of discomforts. Like we can just learn and be in an ecosystem where we all have the privilege to be able to have that time and space and status to learn. And we can automate all the jobs that really nobody likes doing anyway.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I fully agree. It might be a slightly hippie view, but I completely agree. I think
it's a very hippie view. I mean, we could do the kumbaya sesh on that whole thing, but I just
campfire.
There's just no reason to build AI if it's not to improve the human condition. It's
100%. And that's why I think sometimes it's a bit crazy when sort of governments get involved with the, like, we're not going to allow autonomous vehicles, or we're not even going to test it. I just think it's a bit mental, because ultimately it's going to help people, because if you have computers are better at making decisions than humans are, generally speaking. If you want to reduce
certain decisions, they're certainly not better. They're certainly not better at reading a room. Still, they're certainly not better at reading a room of people. Like, even after a couple of interactions, I'm starting to get to know who you are and starting to know kind of the type of person you are and how you want to do things and what your humor is and all that type of stuff. And like, that memory is really important. That referenceability is really important. But I wouldn't be able to just immediately read a room of somebody brand new to be able to tell you whether.
No.
And a machine can't do any better than that yet.
No. Well, it's taken us as humans millions and millions of years to get to that point. So
and we're trying to get a machine there in 2.5 years so far, since the real interesting learning aspects have come to the market. And I'm sure we're going to uncover many more interesting learning aspects.
Yeah, 100%. One final question from me then, linking to sort of AI and back to sort of the world of business, I suppose. I guess, if you were sort of starting a new business today with all of the capabilities that are out there today, what would be your, I guess, what would be the tools and priorities that you would have from a sort of technology perspective? How can people get the best out of the software that's available today, I suppose? Because everybody uses ChatGPT or Claude or something like that, but
yeah, I mean, I think we're right on the precipice. We're at a very interesting point. So one of the biggest challenges with artificial intelligence is actually getting the right data and data structures and training data. And so we're at a very interesting point that if you understand how to structure your data and get training, because there's a lot of data out there, but it doesn't mean you could just throw it against an AI and it'll spit something incredible back to you. And I think a lot of businesses, this is where we're in that kind of valley of despair at the moment, where a lot of businesses have invested a lot in saying, well, put all our company data in there. It's like, well, you have to structure it, you have to make sure it's good, and then you have to, then the AI may have been trained for a use case, but that had a certain bias in it that you didn't realize that now doesn't transfer over to this use case, so you have to retrain. So I think learning how to train and just using the tools as they are today would be the best part to start. So if I was a solo, kind of just, if Element Human had wrapped up and I was starting a brand new business, I'd probably just kind of start writing into my ideas and all that type of stuff into, so I like using ChatGPT for kind of ideation sparring as a sparring partner. I mean, it's just the thinking partner is incredible.
It's great, especially the voice system they've got now.
Oh yeah, I mean, you just sit there, go like, what about this? What about that? And like half the time, it is making some shit up, or I have to double check it. But
yeah,
it's just really good to get me thinking.
Yeah,
and so it's getting back into the practice of doing that, and but that's my style of working. So I'm an extrovert, and I like to work with people. So it's very much let's chat, let's spar, let's beat up ideas, and that works really well for me. So I would definitely start there. I am working on one though for me internally, because I'm currently going from founder to CEO of the business, and a bit of a leadership pathway for me. And so I was like, well, actually, at the end of every day, I would like it to kind of look at all the calls I've done, all the recordings that I've done, look at all the stuff that I've written and all that type of stuff, and tell me kind of what's been high energy, what's been long, what's been thoughtful, what's been boring, where have I not really hit kind of the engagement expectations I want to hit, where have I not contributed the value to the people I was hoping to contribute. And I think just having even like a personal development coach, I think there's a really, really interesting play there too. But yeah, I like using the chat approach was brilliant. It was a brilliant way to break into the market. And that Claude from Anthropic is really, really powerful, particularly for writing. And so, yeah, I'm a big fan of these, and soon I'm hoping coding comes along too. But I mean, I just looked at how do I build a web app that does this for me, because I am a non-technical founder.
Yeah.
And just imagine the types of businesses you can unlock for people if the cost of ChatGPT is $20 a month.
Yeah.
And if it can help you build a web app for you to actually start collecting the right data, for you to then train a very unique or an insightful type of AI or capability or app for people, I mean, you could create huge businesses off of that stuff.
100%. Even if it was just getting you to beta stage, so it was here's a product, go and test your market with it, and then you can go and hire some proper developers to do it. But yeah, I mean, developers do an amazing job, so I would never want to get rid of them from the world. But yeah, that would be a great.
Again, their job just changes. It changes from writing code to reviewing code, or it changes from reviewing code to developing new methods of coding, and so it just changes. It just evolves.
100%. I could rattle about that for hours. It's a really interesting subject. But thank you, Matt. I think that's a really interesting conversation. So thank you for joining us. And
yeah, thanks for your time.
100%.
This is really fun. Appreciate it.
Wonderful.